What's up, everyone? Kenneth the K-Rock Klein here, and this is the real 39th episode of Krocking, Locking, and Dropping with the K-Rock. And folks, I gotta tell you what, I'm gonna be a little bit cringy on this episode because there's just some things that, I know we need to discuss, I know we needed to talk about, but the biggest sporting event going on this week and for the next couple weeks, of course, the World Series. And while we are always excited for every World Series, depending on which team you root for, this one kind of has the makings to be an instant classic in terms of the marketing, the two teams that are involved, the two most iconic teams involved between the Los Angeles Dodgers and the New York Yankees. Two teams which I have respect for as far as their history and as far as the players that played for that organization, but as of lately, don't really have that same level of respect. I don't want to call it hatred, but there's just a little bit of disrespect from my end, and I won't dive into that too much, although I will be talking about the World Series on this episode. And the reason why is because I wanted to get into a conversation that we know how historic the Yankees-Dodgers rivalry is, but how does it compare to other sports? Well, we know what the obvious NBA Finals rivalry is, but what about in the NFL? We'll get into that in just a moment to talk about it. Then I'm going to get into Deshaun Watson. I'm going to talk about whether or not his NFL career could potentially be over. Because, as we all know, the latest news, he has suffered an Achilles injury, which is unfortunately season-ending. And it just seems as if Deshaun Watson will more than likely not be back on the football field for a number of reasons, which I'll dive right into, but we all know what those reasons are in a sense. So I'll talk about Deshaun Watson on this episode. Then I'm going to go back, make a prediction, maybe make a prediction for the World Series, but then I'm also going to be making my predictions for this week's NFL games. And, solid week for me, I will say, but, you never know. I could be better, I could be worse next week. So, with that being said, we're going to step aside. We're going to be talking about the World Series on our next segment. Dodgers-Yankees, who do y'all have winning? We'll get into that. I may or may not make a prediction again, but I'm going to be talking about it and how it compares to other sports leagues. So stay tuned, folks. We'll be right back. Well, it's been a long time coming. It has definitely been a long time coming for those that have waited for a long time. But you know what? We finally have our World Series. Perhaps the most marketed World Series that is going to take place. The two most iconic franchises in all of Major League Baseball. The New York Yankees and the Los Angeles Dodgers. Man. I have never been alive until now where I saw the Dodgers and Yankees play each other in the World Series. It's been so long. It's been a long time. The last time the two teams met in a World Series was in 1981. That would be 10 years before I was born. So, man, talk about a sense of awe and inspiration and everything. But, yeah, the World Series. Yankees, Dodgers, whether you love it or hate it, me personally, I'm so-so about it. I'm mixed about it. I swear this election season is getting harder and harder because we have to choose between two presidential candidates, which may or may not be the most popular choices for the other side, but then we have two baseball teams to root for who may or may not be the most popular choices for all the other teams that are having to sit back and watch this upcoming World Series. So, yeah, it's kind of a lose-lose situation for everybody here except for those parties involved. Whether you love it or hate it, it is the World Series, and I think it's safe to say that Major League Baseball is going to have itself a true fall classic for a couple of reasons. You have the two most marketed franchises, as I said earlier, but not only that, you have arguably the two best players in all of Major League Baseball, Aaron Judge and Shohei Ohtani. Since Shohei Ohtani came to the Dodgers, he has definitely taken them over the hump as the Dodgers are trying to look for their first full season championship since 1988 We don't count 2020, people, okay? That is what it is. But they're looking for their first full season championship since 1988, and they're looking to get themselves a championship, which would definitely be very good for them and for their fan bases after having lost a couple of World Series previously, not counting the ones in 2020 because they won that, even though, again, it doesn't really count. Then, on the other hand, you have the New York Yankees, who have gone 15 years since their last World Series appearance, which they won back in 2009. And listen, the Yankees were always going to be back in the World Series. It was just a matter of when. Like, since 1923, when the Yankees won their first World Series, they have been to the World Series in every decade except for the 2010s. Yes, the 2010s were the only decade in which they did not appear. Some people say they probably should have been in there, but you know what? It doesn't matter. They lost. No matter how you look at the circumstances, no matter what, they still lost. They didn't get there. They didn't get the job done. So boom, end of story. Argue it all you want, but you still lost. End of story. But the Yankees were never going to be kept out of the World Series for too long. You knew eventually they were going to get back, and they're back. So, as it stands right now, the World Series between the Los Angeles Dodgers and the New York Yankees, probably the most iconic World Series matchup in recent years. Game 1 of the World Series will be this Friday, and it will be in Dodger Stadium, of course, since the Dodgers have the better record. But Friday, Saturday, as the Dodgers hosting the first two games. Then you have Monday and Tuesday at Yankee Stadium. If necessary, next Wednesday will be Game 5. Then, of course, if necessary, next Friday and next Saturday, Game 6 and 7 at Dodger Stadium. So this should definitely be a great World Series if you are a diehard fan of baseball as well. But here's the thing about what makes this World Series special. Like, there's a rivalry between the two teams. And this goes all the way back to when the two franchises were both in New York. Yes, the Los Angeles Dodgers used to be in New York along with the Yankees. But actually, the Dodgers played in Brooklyn, a suburb of New York. Or suburb or borough of New York. Like, they call it boroughs for that matter up there. I want to make sure I get it right. So, yeah, the Brooklyn Dodgers were in New York. In fact, there were three teams that were in New York at the time. You not only had the Yankees, you not only had the Dodgers, but you also had the Giants. Yep, the San Francisco Giants also used to be in New York, for that matter. If you were living in New York during the 1950s, or if you had your grandfather, elder people live in New York in that time frame, man, that would have been a great time to be in New York, because you had three baseball teams all vying for the right to become champions and to claim New York, and more often than not, it would always be the Yankees that was taking all the championships. But specifically speaking, the Yankees and the Dodgers, they do have a historic rivalry, for that matter. This will be the 12th World Series appearance for both teams against each other. In other words, this will be the 12th time these two teams have met. All time, the New York Yankees have won 8 times. 1941, 47, 49, 52, 53, 56, 77, and 78. And the Dodgers have only won 3 times, 1955, 1963, and the last time the two teams met in 1981. So yeah, that is a rivalry that has taken place and has taken shape. Kind of makes you think of another iconic sports rivalry. The one sports rivalry that I'm thinking about is, of course, the Boston Celtics and the Los Angeles Lakers. Kind of ironic for 2 reasons. Number one, you have the Los Angeles team in there that has been on the wrong side of the majority of meetings between the two teams. But also that they have already met each other 12 times, and this is the 12th time that the two teams of the Yankees and Dodgers will meet each other. But yeah, in the Celtics-Lakers rivalry, the Celtics have won 9 times against the Lakers, whereas the Lakers won 3 times, for that matter. So you go all the way back to the days of the superstars in the 1960s. The Celtics and the Lakers were very dominant. So clearly, the Yankees and the Dodgers, in my opinion, are the Celtics and the Lakers of Major League Baseball. And I don't think anyone else can argue with that. But it's gotten me to thinking, What about in the NFL? Is it possible that there is a rivalry that compares to the Yankees and the Dodgers or to the Celtics and the Lakers in the NFL? Like, is there a team in the NFC and against an AFC team that have met each other multiple times in the Super Bowl that you can honestly say compares to the two franchises that I talk about that are in the World Series right now? And I thought about this a lot. And to be quite honest, I don't think you're ever going to have that in the NFL. You might have one rivalry that is similar to that, but I just don't think it eclipses what we're seeing here with the Yankees and the Dodgers right now. And so I did a lot of thinking, and there are a number of reasons why the Yankees and Dodgers are comparable to the Celtics and the Lakers and not to another rivalry in the NFL for that matter. There are a couple reasons. Number one, there are more games during the regular season with the NBA and Major League Baseball. The NBA has 82 games right now, and then, of course, the playoff series that go best of 7. Major League Baseball has 162 games in a regular season. Then you have your best of 3 wild card, your best of 5 divisional series, your best of 7 LCS, and now your best of 7 World Series. So there are more games that are being played in Major League Baseball and the NBA. In the NFL, you only get 17 games, and then, of course, you have single elimination playoff games. So technically speaking, any NFL games are played over a week. So, in essence, you don't have enough time to really digest the rivalry between the two teams in the NFL because it takes a number of games to develop a rivalry. Whereas in the NFL, it may take a number of years or it may take a number of matchups. But, you know, if you're talking about a team in the Super Bowl, it would have to require an NFL team or 2 NFL teams on opposite conferences to meet each other in the Super Bowl for 3 years in a row before we can honestly say that rivalry can be compared to the Yankees and the Dodgers as well. It's going to require a lot more games. Like if the NFL had gone to a 20-game schedule, or maybe they play if they were to have a game for 2 games per week for the NFL season, that might make it a big difference. But the NFL is a 1-week sport, whereas basketball, you'll have 2 to 3 games a week. And then, of course, in Major League Baseball, you also have, you play 6 to 7 days a week. So, in essence, that's where the rivalry with the Yankees and Dodgers are compared to the Celtics and the Lakers and not to the NFL. But it's not just that. There's the historic dominance of one team over the other. As I said, the Yankees have won more times over the Dodgers, but in doing so, it's been crushing. 8 times to 3 that the Yankees have defeated the Dodgers in their 11 meetings previously. The Celtics have dominated the Lakers 9 to 3. Now, when you look at the NFL situation here, and this is where I did a little research, and I came to the realization that there have been 8 times in the history of the NFL in the Super Bowl that 2 teams have met each other more than once. Only one time has 2 teams met each other 3 times in the Super Bowl, and that, of course, is the Pittsburgh Steelers and the Dallas Cowboys. The Steelers have defeated the Cowboys 2 times. They did so in the 1970s, whereas the Cowboys got a measure of revenge in 1995. So that's really been the most iconic Super Bowl matchup ever, but that's like 1/4 of what these other matchups are going up. That's a quarter of what the Yankees and Dodgers are experiencing, or what the Celtics and the Lakers have experienced. And not only that, it's pretty dead even, like in a sense. Like football is a game where you can have both teams, play well. Like it's not a situation where one team can dominate the other team like it is now. The fact is, the Super Bowl is just one game. The World Series is a series of games. Same thing with the NBA Finals. And that's why I feel that we're not going to have that opportunity, because anybody in the NFL can play in that Super Bowl as long as they have the breaks go their way. Whereas you might have an opportunity to show that you're the best team and win a best of 7 series in the playoffs. Even if you lose the first game, hey, it's okay. You can come back and win the next game, and you can get yourself back in the series. Whereas if in Super Bowl, if you lose first game, even if you're the best team, sorry, you lost. You lose the Super Bowl. You only get one chance. And I think the Yankees and the Dodgers have the benefit of playing multiple games, of having multiple chances as well. But not only, I did a little sidestep in there between the Cowboys and the Steelers, basically how they only met each other for 3 times, but everybody else has met each other twice, well, in these other 7 matchups. The Chiefs and 49ers have met each other twice. The Chiefs, of course, won both times. The New England Patriots and the St. Louis and Los Angeles Rams, depending on where they played, they met each other in 2 Super Bowls. The Patriots are 2-0 against them. The Philadelphia Eagles and the New England Patriots met each other twice. They split their 2 meetings. The Patriots won in 2004. The Eagles won in 2017. The New York Giants and the New England Patriots. Here's a matchup that isn't favorable to New England. The Giants have swept the Patriots in their 2 meetings in Super Bowls in 2007 and 2011. In the early 90s, the Buffalo Bills and the Dallas Cowboys met each other in back-to-back Super Bowls in 92 and 93. Dallas, of course, coming away victorious both times. In the 1980s, you had the Cincinnati Bengals meeting the San Francisco 49ers. The 49ers defeated the Bengals in both meetings in 1981 and 1988. Then the very, I don't want to say it was the very first time, but like one of the first few occasions where you had multiple teams, 2 teams meeting each other multiple times, were the Miami Dolphins and the soon-to-be Washington Commanders, but they went by another name, and I would say it, but I don't know if anybody out there listening is, a real PC expert, and I don't want to say anything to offend anybody, so I'm just going to call them the team that eventually became the Washington Commanders. Miami, of course, won in 1972, the undefeated season. Washington won in 1982, 10 years later, in Super Bowl 17. So that's the thing. Like, when it comes to the NFL, you have 32 teams. All 32 teams are very capable of making it to the Super Bowl. But they play in fewer games. And in order for a rivalry to, be as dominant or like the Celtics, Lakers, or the Yankees, Dodgers, you need to have one team or one of the 2 teams that meet each other more than 3 times to be dominant. So if you take the Cowboys and Steelers, if let's say the next 5 years the Cowboys and the Steelers meet each other in the Super Bowls, and let's say Pittsburgh wins 4 of those 5, it would be Pittsburgh with 6, Dallas with 2. Now, that would only make it 8 times that the 2 teams met each other, but Pittsburgh being 6 and Dallas being 2, that's pretty fair considering that you're playing a sport where it's win or go home in one game, whereas in the NBA Finals and the Baseball World Series, you have multiple games a chance in a series to win. So, not necessarily a bad thing. But then there's the third reason why the Yankees and the Dodgers are comparable to the Celtics and the Lakers and not with the NFL. Look at the superstars that were on those teams. I mean, you go back to the times of the Yankees, like in the rivalry years with the Brooklyn Dodgers or the Dodgers from 1941 to 1981. The Yankees had players like Joe DiMaggio, Mickey Mantle, Billy Martin, Whitey Ford, Reggie Jackson, just to name a few. Like, those were 5 guys that were so iconic and so, incredible, like, for their respective teams. Then on the Dodgers, you had Jackie Robinson, Duke Snider, Roy Campanella, Sandy Koufax, a great pitcher that he was. Man, that guy could have won 300 games if his elbow had stayed healthy. And then Steve Garvey. That was a good first baseman for the Dodgers there. And yeah, all those great Dodger players that have played for, whether you played in Brooklyn or whether you played in Los Angeles, that was a historic rivalry. Some great matchups, You think back to in 1955, after losing to the Yankees multiple times, the Dodgers finally got their big break and defeated them. Then a year later, Don Larson for the Yankees throws a perfect game, the first ever perfect game, and was the only no-hitter in World Series history until 2022. But I'll spare the Dodgers fans the agony of having to hear me say it. But yeah, then of course you think about Reggie Jackson hitting 3 home runs in Game 6 of the '77 World Series to clinch it all for the Yankees. And yeah, I mean there was just some great matchups, some great rivalry moments there. Now compare that with the Celtics and the Lakers. Bill Russell, Tommy Heinsohn, John Havlicek, Sam Jones, Larry Bird, Kevin McHale, Robert Parrish that played for the Boston Celtics in their runs against the Lakers. And then for LA, Jerry West, Elgin Baylor, Wilt Chamberlain, Magic Johnson, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, James Worthy. I mean, man, you're talking about some epic, iconic matches. Oh, and let me, by the way, I don't know why I didn't think about this, but let me add in a few more players for both teams that met each other in the 2010s or the 2000s and 2010s. But Paul Pierce, Kevin Garnett, Ray Allen for the Celtics, then Kobe Bryant and Pau Gasol for the Lakers. It's kind of crazy how Shaquille O'Neal was not with the Lakers when they played the Celtics in 2008. But yeah, I mean, the closest that Shaq could have played the Celtics as a Laker was in 2002, but the New Jersey Nets ended up defeating the Boston Celtics in the Eastern Conference Finals. So, man, we were so close to having an interesting series in 2002. And I think that's probably what David Stern wanted in 2002. I know most people wanted, the Sacramento Kings. Like, they talk about how the Lakers and Kings Western Conference Finals was rigged by some controversial calls in Game 6, but that's a story for another day because we got to get back to what we really need to talk about. So basically, the thing is, there's not really a rivalry between the that's comparable in the NFL to the Yankees and Dodgers. You're more likely to see that in the NBA as the Yankees and the Dodgers are like the Celtics and the Lakers. I mean, that's just the way it is in terms of rivalry comparisons. Two iconic franchises, one out dominating the other over the years, but the other team does get its fair share of opportunities. So who knows? Will it be the case where the Yankees win their 9th time all time against the Dodgers, or will the Dodgers make it 4 championships against the Yankees, historically speaking? So that's going to be a series for the ages. Okay, so here's my thoughts on this World Series, and I'm kind of bittersweet about this because, as I've said, I have tremendous respect for the two teams, historically speaking. But in recent years, that respect has kind of gone out the window. Now, I understand both teams have hatred towards the team that I root for, and everybody does. At some point, you're just going to have to get over that eventually, and it may take a while. But at some point, you're going to have to say it. You probably weren't going to win. I know for certain you weren't going to win because it really wouldn't have made much of a difference anyways. But the thing about this is a World Series that needed to happen. Major League Baseball needed a World Series like this between the two teams from, well, I don't know if New York's a coastal city, even though it does overlook the Hudson River, which does lead into the Atlantic Ocean. But you have the two iconic franchises in the two biggest markets in the United States. They needed this World Series. And you have the two best players, Aaron Judge, Shohei Ohtani, guys that are more likely going to be the MVPs of their respective leagues for this upcoming season. So you have to think that this was a World Series that was needed and that was necessary. So, in essence, this is a World Series from a marketing perspective that is going to be great boost for baseball, great boost for the sport, and definitely if you're Commissioner Manfred, whether you love him or hate him, which I think there's a majority of people that despise him, but it's definitely a win-win for Major League Baseball as well. But for me personally, this was not the matchup that I wanted, because in a way, it's really cool to see history take shape. But I sometimes feel like the Yankees and the Dodgers have kind of behaved in a way that just makes it seem like, well, we're the Yankees, we're the Dodgers, we put on uniforms, and it's like I lost a lot of respect for them after all that. I can understand their frustrations and anger towards my team after all the stuff that came out after that one year, that championship of 2017, which I still think we would have won regardless. We just didn't need to do that. I understand their anger and frustration. But what angers me more is when you say that, oh, we deserve it, we deserve the championship, this, that. No, you don't. You don't deserve anything. You don't deserve crap. Because you didn't put yourself in a position to win. You might have had a chance, but you still failed. You still failed miserably. I mean, the Yankee fans, they can argue all they want, but the fact is, they are 0-4 against the Astros in the playoffs. That's it. They're 0-4 against the Astros. They can't beat the Astros. And yeah, they might be lucky and say, well, at least we didn't have to play the Astros here. And I know some fans might say, well, this championship wouldn't matter because they didn't play the Astros. Look, the Yankees were the best team, obviously, and they deserve to be there. But the fact is, you cannot convince me that there's still a little bit of bitterness towards the franchise of the Yankees, that they feel like just because they're the Yankees, they got 27 World Series championships, doesn't, they deserve to get everything. No, you don't. And look, the media will probably kiss your you-know-what and try to, praise you for everything. But at this point, it doesn't matter. You still would have lost. Get over it. Now you have an opportunity to win a championship, which, if you don't win a championship, Aaron Judge's legacy is going to be called into question. Because, in all fairness, he has not really stepped up in these playoffs. Now, yes, he did have a big hit in Game 4 against the Cleveland Indians in a really great series. But Giancarlo Stanton was the most valuable player in the ALCS, and rightfully so. He deserved to be the MVP. And, I mean, Giancarlo Stanton is having a better postseason than Aaron Judge. But Aaron Judge is supposed to be the guy. He's supposed to be the leader. For Aaron Judge to really affirm his legacy with a championship, he needs to step up big time in the postseason and in the playoffs as well. So I feel like there's going to be some pressure on Aaron Judge because you haven't been able to get to the World Series previously. You had your chances. You haven't. Now you're here. Now you're in the World Series. You need to step up and you need to take care of business. So as far as I'm concerned, you need to step up if you're Aaron Judge and the Yankees. Then there's the Dodgers. I can go on and on about all the reasons why they were not going to win a World Series in 2017, and they need to just shut up and forgive the Stros and move on, but that's going to be easier said than done. I just hope time heals all wounds. I'll say one thing before I get into the Dodgers. Clayton Kershaw, yeah, I read your interview, but I got to ask you this question. You call yourself a really good Christian man. If you're a good Christian man, why can't you find it in your heart to forgive? In fact, I'm doing a little bit of Bible reading here right now. I think if I were Clayton Kershaw, I would open the Bible, go to the book of Matthew, turn to chapter 6, and read verse 14 through 15, where it says, "For if you forgive others their trespasses, your heavenly Father will also forgive you. But if you do not forgive others their trespasses, neither will your Father forgive your trespasses." So as far as I'm concerned, Clayton Kershaw, you might have bitterness in your heart right now, but I just think you need to move past it. If you want to prove that you're a good person, a good Christian man, at some point, I'm not saying now, I'm not saying tomorrow, I'm not saying, next week or next month, at some point you're going to have to forgive. You may not say it publicly, but I think deep down you should. Because everybody makes mistakes. Everybody, makes some bad choices. You probably made some bad choices as well. But ultimately, I think hopefully you realize, despite all this, maybe it wasn't meant to be. Maybe God put you on earth to find a way to forgive, and God put the Stros on the earth to learn to overcome the adversity that they're about to encounter and hopefully find forgiveness from other people, which I know is going to take a long time. So I feel like Clayton Kershaw, you need to forgive. And I know you're on the verge of winning a second championship. Well, you know what? That's going to equal the Stros situation if you do win the second championship. But anyways, Dodgers, there's definitely a lot of pressure because they have been compared to the Atlanta Braves in some aspects. Like, they've been the most dominant team in the National League from a consistent basis. I mean, You look at how much they have succeeded. They've been to the World Series multiple times. They have won a championship. Now they get an opportunity to win another championship, which they really want to bring something back to the city of Los Angeles. Because remember, when they won the World Series in 2020, which we don't count, but when they won it in 2020, they didn't play in Los Angeles. They played in freaking Arlington at Green Acres Ballpark, for that matter. Green Acres is the place to be. Well, not for me around that time. But, anyways, they won a World Series in Arlington, but they didn't get a chance to celebrate with their fans. So I can understand why they would want nothing more than to celebrate with the fans after not having done so because of COVID-19. But there's a lot of pressure on them because at times the Dodgers have not been, they've been the best team in the NL West, but they haven't really shown to be the best team. It took a great pitching effort from Los Angeles to win, to come back to beat the San Diego Padres after they fell behind 2-0. It took great pitching from them. It even took a great bounce back performance after they lost to the New York Mets. And, Jack Flaherty, the guy that they got in trade, he got rocked in Game 5. So there's definitely going to be some pressure on him. So clearly, the Los Angeles Dodgers are a team that is looking to add to their legacy. I mean, Mookie Betts looking to win another championship. Of course, he's still under the microscope for that one championship in Boston. Freddie Freeman looking to win his second title after winning one with Atlanta in 2021. But the player, of course, that's under the most microscope is Shohei Ohtani. He's finally in the World Series. He's the best player in baseball right now. The guy that is more than deserving to win the MVP. And listen, I like Shohei Ohtani. I do. I think he's a great player. He's tremendous. When he first came to Major League Baseball from Japan, the fact that he was not only a great hitter, but a great pitcher, that was great. I just hated how his career was being wasted with the Angels. Same thing with Mike Trout, because the Angels had the two best players in all of Major League Baseball, and yet their careers were being wasted because the Angels weren't making the playoffs. So that's really why I felt like Shohei Ohtani is deserving to be in the World Series. Major League Baseball never had a legitimate superstar except meeting up in a World Series. Yes, there was Jose Altuve, who was a superstar and should still be, even though people are going to have a hard time forgiving him at certain points, which they should. But then, of course, you had Juan Soto. Now, he's back in a World Series. He's also looking for a second championship, but he's with the Yankees now, so we'll move past him for the time being. But he's a great player. But my thing is, baseball didn't really have a iconic superstar until Bryce Harper in 2022, and that's why he made that World Series real interesting, even though the Phillies lost to 6 to my team. So I really believe Major League Baseball needed a superstar, and Shohei Ohtani is that guy. Now, he and Aaron Judge are going to carry the franchises, the forefront to their teams, but you know what? I think it's definitely great that we're getting this World Series. It's just unfortunate for me because, I'm not trying to show bitterness. I'm not the kind of person that hates a lot because I feel like if you're a hater, you're a loser, and I don't think it's fair. I just don't think I want to do what the Dodgers and the Yankees did previously. But since this is a prediction kind of show, I will be making a prediction, and this is a prediction that I'm going to have to just suck it up and say it, suck it up and admit it. But you know what? In spite of everything that has happened over the last few years, and I know for certain, I got a good feeling that, this team that I pick is going to lose again. And I think both teams are going to lose again to my team eventually in the future. But that being said, I think it will come down to 7 games. And I think there will be banner number 28. I think the Yankees are going to win it. It's going to be tough because I know at times the Yankees bullpen has been suspect. But when you have guys like Aaron Judge in a lineup, same thing with Giancarlo Stanton, who's really having a great postseason, stepping up, and Juan Soto, that's an offense that should carry the Yankees all the way to the championship as well. But I think the Yankees will split the first two games. They'll take 2 out of 3 in New York. And then after the Dodgers win Game 6, it will go to Game 7 and the Yankees will just steamroll them. So that's the way I look at it. So I think the New York Yankees will win. I say this with regret, with a little bit of cringiness inside. But yeah, I picked the Yankees to win in 7 games. So, and then, of course, the Dodgers will be reminded of why the acronyms of LA should go from Los Angeles to Losers Anonymous. But nah, that's a joke. Don't get me wrong. But anyway, so yeah, I picked the Yankees to win. We'll see what happens there. But folks, when we come back, we're going to be talking about the tragic downfall of one Deshaun Watson and how this injury that he has recently suffered could potentially be the ending of his career. Stay tuned, folks. We'll be right back. I'm not going to lie to you, folks. I have to admit that I am still shocked over what has happened to Deshaun Watson over the years. Like, really. I mean, it still amazes me how we have gone from seeing Deshaun Watson growing up as a high school football player down in Georgia to going to play for Clemson and leading them to a national championship, then get drafted 12th overall by the Houston Texans, and everyone's already thinking that he was going to be the best quarterback out of that year's draft, better than Patrick Mahomes, well, obviously better than Mitchell Trubisky, but yeah, everyone thought he was going to be the bright quarterback of the future. And early on in his career, he seemed to have that. I mean, his rookie season, he ends up, starting and goes 4-3 before he suffers an ACL injury, which is something that is going to be a recurring theme here. And then the next 2 seasons, he plays well, leads the Texans to the playoffs, gets them a playoff victory, and yeah, they ended up suffering a heartbreaking loss to the Kansas City Chiefs, who would go on to win the Super Bowl in 2019. Deshaun Watson then signs a 4-year contract in 2020, and he goes on to have arguably the best season of his NFL career, in spite of the fact that the Texans went 4-12. I mean, let me ask you about these stats. 33 touchdowns, 7 interceptions. Does that look like a quarterback that plays on a 4-12 team or played on a 4-12 team? If you said yes, you have to be kidding yourselves. Because nobody, at least no quarterback in my mind, should have 33 touchdowns and 7 interceptions in the season and still go 4-12. Well, defense obviously is a big part of the problems, so that figures. But yeah, it is so crazy how Deshaun Watson, once upon a time, was seen as this likable quarterback, was seen as the future face of the NFL. And now we are nearing the conclusion of what has to be the most tragic downfall in the history of the NFL. And it makes you wonder, how did we get here? Well, before I dive into exactly how we got here to this point, we need to talk about what happened on Sunday. The Cleveland Browns lost to the Cincinnati Bengals, one of the games that I was fortunate enough to win in my predictions of last week, 21-14. But Deshaun Watson didn't finish the game. He dropped back for a pass and then unexpectedly has a misstep and he crumples to the ground. And it is clear that he has suffered an Achilles injury. And while it was unknown at the time, this would ultimately be a season-ending injury. But you can still see Deshaun Watson crumpled up on the ground. You could still see the emotions of him, knowing that he wanted to be out there on the field with the Cleveland Browns, trying to get them to some success. And he, unfortunately, was seen weeping and crying as he was carted off the field. Now, of course, there is an unwritten rule in sports for all fans, is that you pay respect to the players, whether you like them or don't like them, whether they're on your team or they're on another team that you're rooting against when they're injured. If something bad were to happen to them, if they get injured, you show respect, you clap for them as if to say, hey, get well soon, see you on the football field, as long as you don't win against us and all that. Because the last thing you want is for your worst enemy to get injured or seriously injured. But Cleveland fans had a bit of a different reaction. Suffice to say, they were very, very happy when they saw Deshaun Watson fall to the ground. And they saw him, crumpled up and carted off the field. They cheered. They cheered when he got injured. They were celebrating that. And this is where I feel like I have mixed emotions when it comes to this. Because I feel like regardless of, the situation, and we'll dive right into it in just a moment, regardless of the situation, you still need to be respectful. You still need to show some respect and some class. But then there's that other side to that equation. And before I get into my thoughts on the other side of the equation, I want to play you a clip from Jameis Winston, who was the Browns' backup quarterback, who actually came into the game not after Deshaun Watson, but he was a third-string quarterback that day for some reason, and he wound up playing and finishing the game off. He was interviewed in a press conference, and he had a very passionate reaction to the whole situation with the Browns fans cheering Deshaun Watson's injury. And let's listen to what he had to say.
I was taught to love no matter the circumstances, especially for people who do right by you. I'm grateful that I had a chance to serve Deshaun, but I am very upset with the reaction to a man that has had the world against him for the past 4 years, and he put his body and life on the line for this city every single day, regardless of your perception, regardless of what you thought should happen with him. He committed every single day that I've been here to be the best that he can be for this team. And I know I come from the deep South, Birmingham, Alabama, Bessemer, Alabama. So I know the standard that hungry fans want. But the way I was raised, I will never pull on a man when he's down. But I will be the person to lift him up. And that, all of us have unique experiences. All of us have circumstances, conditions, and facts that we face every single day. And I pride myself in being a man of increase and being a man that wants the best out of everybody. I tell myself every morning, what I want for myself, I want for everyone. And I do not want the treatment that Deshaun Watson has received from these passionate fans. I know you love this game. But when I first got here, I knew these were some amazing fans. But Deshaun was treated badly. And now he has to overcome another obstacle. So I'm going to be there for him. Because I see the way he fights. I see the way that he works. And I know who he is as a person and as an NFL quarterback. And that's all I have to say to address him. I'm sending up my prayers. I already prayed for his leg. And I will continue.
Hats off to Jameis Winston for saying that. Because even though, the situation that is bestowed upon Deshaun Watson, I applaud Jameis Winston for giving out that passionate speech. No matter how you look at it, no matter how you view this situation with what he's done on the field or off the field, nobody should be cheering his injury. Nobody should be cheering the fact that he got crumpled up on the ground. Nobody should be cheering the fact that he cried as he was, carted off the field in a very, very emotional state after the Achilles injury and the Achilles situation. This is why, it really makes me mad, because everybody at some point is going to be tested. Everybody at some point is going to have to overcome the adversity that they're faced. Whether they got themselves in the mess or whether they got themselves in a crisis, which people are going to have to vilify, you're going to need to overcome that. Everybody's going to have to overcome that. And yet it's about how you overcome that. How do you test yourself? How do you make sure that you are the person that is, able to overcome this adversity and these obstacles? How do you define that? How do you try so hard to deal with all the crap that's being put upon you and the emotions of everyone that hates you or boos you and everything in the moment? How do you overcome that? I think that's the bigger story that needs to be talked about. Because as far as I'm concerned, everybody, no matter who you are, whether you are a good person at heart or whether you're somebody that is a big-time jerk in life, everybody at some point is a bad guy, myself included. Now, I haven't done anything controversial, and I hope to God that never happens to me, but everybody at some point, including myself, has been a bad guy at times. I've criticized people for certain things, as has everyone else who has probably criticized me or has said some negative things about me in the past. And everybody's saying the same thing about Deshaun Watson. And look, this is a very complicated situation here. But the fact that you're cheering him over an injury, that he got hurt, that is just... That's the kind of stuff that makes me sick, It just blows my mind. But even though I don't agree, and I feel like Browns fans should be ashamed for this, I can understand why they did it. This was the guy that signed a record-setting $230 million deal for 5 years, ever since he was traded to the Houston Texans. This was the guy that was supposed to be the answer to the equation of the Cleveland Browns' misery after they returned to the NFL in 1999, because there was about a 4 to 5 year period where they were the Baltimore Ravens. And then once the Browns came back, they got all the stuff back, like all the history, all the excitement times that have happened in the previous years before the Browns ended up moving to Baltimore, and then they got the items back. This is a guy that once upon a time was one of the most exciting quarterbacks in all of the NFL, and had it not been for an ACL injury in his rookie season, he wins Rookie of the Year, hands down. If it hadn't been for, some of the struggles that he might have had during his play in Houston, he probably puts them in a better situation. If it wasn't for the coaching situation for the Texans, or the lack of some of the offensive struggles or the defensive bad play, I'm pretty sure Deshaun Watson wins a Super Bowl in Houston. But who am I to judge? The fact remains that Deshaun Watson, the moment he signed with the Cleveland Browns, the moment he was traded with the Cleveland Browns, and he signed that contract, there was going to be a dark cloud over Cleveland, more so than any thunderstorm that came in that area. And that was because of all that had happened, all that was going on with Deshaun Watson ever since he signed that 4-year contract with the Texans. The Texans did not have a great season in 2020, and little did they know that they were about to embark on a pretty dark period of their own. I won't get too much into all the details, but we all know how much Deshaun Watson wanted certain guys to be part of the team, but the ownership didn't listen to him. And Deshaun Watson then says, screw this, I want to be traded. And he wanted out of there. And for some reason, a few days after he demanded a trade, the first of what would be 20-plus accusations of sexual misconduct came out. Now, you can argue and say that this was kind of weird because of, this was kind of coincidental, because maybe whoever came out with the report was not so happy about Deshaun Watson being traded. But after reading all this stuff and, following up on the story, I don't think it. I mean, I don't believe it was a coincidence. I just think this was a guy that is having some serious problems. And yet, for some reason, in spite of all that, the Cleveland Browns decided that they needed a quarterback. Well, hold on a second. Didn't y'all have a quarterback in Baker Mayfield? The guy that led you to a playoff victory in 2020? Didn't y'all have a quarterback in Baker Mayfield who was supposed to be your future? The guy that was supposed to, get you to the Super Bowl, who was expected to be this, tremendous player for Cleveland? Like, you had high hopes for him, and yet he has one bad season, and you're just like, nah, we don't trust you. We need another quarterback. We need someone good. Let's go get Deshaun Watson. He's going to be fine. And, didn't you have Baker Mayfield, and you decided that you just didn't trust him? The Cleveland Browns initially offered, a contract for Deshaun Watson, but he refused. And there were other teams that were in a mix to get him. I know Atlanta was one of the teams, and it would have been fine for Deshaun Watson to go to Atlanta because, he's a Georgia kid. There was New Orleans, who was also a threat, that were in desperate need of a quarterback, someone to replace Drew Brees or maybe take over for Jameis Winston, believe it or not, after Drew Brees retired. But then the Browns came back with an offer, and it was almost like Deshaun Watson couldn't pass up on the deal. Yet, the fact is that Deshaun Watson comes to Cleveland, and right away, you can tell Browns fans were not too happy about it, because how can you root for someone that is under these allegations, that has so much allegations going against him? It's one thing to have one allegation or two, but 20 plus, 23 or 24 to be exact, I don't know. How can you have all those allegations, upon you, and yet the team that you root for, that you've been a proud supporter of, decides to go after him? Well, I believe the Browns were under the illusion that, hey, in spite of everything that's going down, Deshaun Watson's going to be fine. He's going to be the answer, yes and that. Well, let's retract a little bit, because Deshaun Watson did not play the entire 2021 season in Houston because he was still upset, and then the first of the allegations came out. Deshaun Watson gets traded to Cleveland, and then, before you know it, the NFL decides, yeah, this whole thing, regardless of the outcome, we got to make a message. We got to send a message here. So they suspend him for 11 games. He does finish the 2022 season, but he only completed 58.2% of his passes for exactly 183 yards per game, 7 touchdowns, 5 interceptions in those 6 games. So you chalk it up to say, okay, Deshaun Watson, he was rusty. He didn't quite he wasn't himself, but hey, next year he's going to be fine. And early on, he seemed to be okay, he was 5-1, but yet some fans were wondering, was it because of Deshaun Watson, or was it because the Browns had a dominant defense? Well, as we all know, it was the defense for the Browns, because they finished the regular season with the number 1 defense at the time. Yet Deshaun Watson ended up suffering an injury to a fractured shoulder, which required surgery, and he was out for the season again. He struggled. 61.4% of his passes, 185.8 yards per game, 7 touchdowns, 4 interceptions. So clearly he's had 14 touchdowns and 9 interceptions in his first 2 seasons. So now you have to think, okay, he got injured. He was suspended his first year. He got injured. He's going to come back. Cleveland's going to be fine. No. Deshaun Watson has been worse. He's been arguably the worst quarterback in the NFL this season. 61.3% of his passes, 170 yards per game with 5 touchdowns, 3 interceptions. And of course, he had a quarterback rating of 76.6. And Cleveland was 1-6. 1-6 through 7 weeks. And yet, Deshaun Watson was the quarterback for that. If my team approached 1-6, I would need to start making some changes. I would have to gone to a backup quarterback. But then it's like, well, you can't do that if you're the Cleveland Browns, because you're paying this guy all this money. You paid him all this money, and he's obviously struggling, but yet you still have to keep him, or Kevin Stefanski, the 2-time head coach of the year, has to keep him as a starting quarterback, answering the question, hey, why isn't Deshaun Watson still the quarterback? Why isn't he being benched and everything? Because the feeling, I feel like Cleveland was waiting for him to break out, because eventually he's going to break out. Well, clearly it is not working. And right now, The Cleveland Browns are they're in a no-win situation. And this is why I feel bad for Browns fans, because I'm pretty sure Browns fans, the ones that were loyal, the ones that understood morality, they probably didn't want Deshaun Watson. They probably didn't want him because of all the allegations. If it had been 2020, when he vowed for a trade, before everything came out, they would have accepted him and they would have loved him. But yet, Deshaun Watson has completely wasted the Cleveland Browns. And as of right now, he is, obviously going to be watching the rest of the season from the bench. But yet, I don't know. My thing is, I'm not sure what happens to Deshaun Watson. Do I think his career is over? I don't think so. But do I think he's ever going to get back to the level that he was when he was in Houston? No, I don't think so. I think Deshaun Watson had put that all on himself. And I could sit here and say, how much, Deshaun Watson, he wanted to be out there. He tried, but it was obvious that what he did, the situation he got himself in, that was going to hurt him. That's going to hurt his legacy, no matter how you look at it. And the fact that he has, in some ways, succumbed to every sort of pressure with all the contract that he signed, the ridiculousness of that contract, then the poor play itself is just sad. Now, I still say Cleveland was wrong for booing Deshaun Watson when he went on the field, but I can understand it. I do. I would be upset if Deshaun Watson was the quarterback who was supposed to be the guy to lead the team, and he disappointed everyone with his poor play. So it's just really unfortunate. And I don't know I really feel bad for Cleveland fans right now because, man, they really have been the most heartbroken, snake-bitten franchise out there in history. We can talk about my Texans. We can talk about the Detroit Lions, even though the Lions are still, one of the best teams in the NFL and maybe a team that could win the Super Bowl this year in the NFC. We could talk about the Vikings. We could talk about the Buffalo Bills, and we could talk about all these, snake-bitten franchises. But it feels like Cleveland's been the one that suffered the most. And that's just really sad to think about where they're at the moment. And it's going to be another couple of years because right now the Browns are in line for a top 5 draft pick in the NFL. And it's going to take a while before we can really see Cleveland be in contention to make the playoffs and then potentially make the Super Bowl, because what they did when they offered Deshaun Watson that contract, they sold their soul to the devil. They hoped that Deshaun Watson was going to be the guy, and it's not been like that. And I'm sorry, Browns fans, you deserve every criticism. Not you, the fans, but the organization deserves criticism. And I know, it sucks. I hate that for y'all. As someone that's had to deal with that criticism for my favorite team when they got themselves into some trouble, I hate it. I hate it. I really want them, I really want to go all to the media members who criticize and just tell them to stick it up there, you know what. But I can't do that because, the organization got themselves in trouble. They need to figure it out. And I don't know what the Browns are going to do. I really don't. Do I think they can still turn this thing around? I don't think they're going to make the playoffs. They might have a strong finish. They might finish strong, but I just don't see how it's going to work out for them. So, and it really is sad just seeing the Browns' fate at the moment. But it's just sad that there have been athletes that have had some tragic downfalls, but I don't know if I've ever seen a tragic downfall as much as Deshaun Watson. I don't know what happened. I don't know what he was thinking. I wish I knew what he might have gotten himself into. I don't even understand why he went through all that trouble. I don't know if Deshaun Watson is I want to say he's not a criminal or a really psychopathic person, but what he went through, it just seems psychopathic, even though I don't believe he is a legitimate psychopathic person. I could be wrong. And if he does something else, if more stuff comes up from him in the future, then I'll retract my statement and I'll apologize for those that believe that he is. But it's just so sad because I used to have a Deshaun Watson Texans jersey, and I'm kind of glad I got rid of it because, man, if I still had that around, and with everything that was going on, yeah, that's just bad. But I really hope that whoever wears number 4 for the Texans in the future makes it a positive light, because, yeah, it's hard to see a Texans number 4 without thinking about Deshaun Watson. So, but yeah, the Cleveland Browns, who also just signed Bailey Zapp as of, this podcast to be the backup quarterback, they're in a tough situation. And it's just crazy to think that the Browns made 3 mistakes. Number 1, of course, was when they acquired Deshaun Watson in the trade, knowing full well that there was a potential for them, for him not to be playing immediately because of the allegations and the investigation. And they were risking having him miss most of the season to be the starting quarterback. And he was only going to play about 6 games. Number 2, they let Baker Mayfield go. And knowing full well that Baker Mayfield could at least revive his career and play potentially his best football. And yes, it did take a couple of teams, but Baker Mayfield seems to have found a perfect fit in Tampa Bay right now. The Buccaneers are definitely a threat to win the NFC South again. And I'm not saying Baker Mayfield is an elite quarterback, but he's definitely playing probably his best football in recent years. And number 3, you give up so much picks to the Texans that right now they are in a position to potentially build themselves a championship team. Texans are sitting at 5-2, whereas the Browns are watching C.J. Stroud or Will Anderson, a guy that they could have had, or maybe some of the other picks. They have a potential, the Texans have a potential to be a championship team. And it was all thanks due to the trade of the picks for the Cleveland Browns. Yeah, that's 3 big mistakes. 3 big mistakes. I don't think I've ever seen that happen before. And if it happens again, man, whoever does it, and hopefully it's not my team, but whoever does the same thing that the Browns did, terrible. Terrible, terrible, terrible. So that's the tragedy of the Cleveland Browns at the moment. The latest tragedy of the soap opera known as the Cleveland Browns. We'll see what next episode brings up in the drama of the Cleveland Browns. But right now, folks, we're going to step aside. But when we come back, I give out my predictions for this upcoming week. So stay tuned, folks. We'll be right back. Right, so we are going to conclude the show with my NFL Week 8 predictions. Last week I went 10-5, so my overall record right now is 72-35, and it's definitely a good record, but we'll see if I can do better than 10 wins. Hopefully I get a perfect week, and maybe this might be the perfect opportunity to get a perfect week. I don't know, because all 16 teams are playing this week. No bye weeks for anybody, but we'll wait and see. So anyways, here we go. First game, Minnesota Vikings against the Los Angeles Rams. The Vikings suffering their first loss in the NFL and, against the Detroit Lions. And that was a game I thought Minnesota might have had a chance to build momentum, but I'm really not surprised that Detroit was able to make a statement. So I think Minnesota is going to learn from this, and I think they'll be okay going up against the Rams. So I pick Minnesota to win. Then we got the Green Bay Packers against the Jacksonville Jaguars. Jordan Love, maybe not a good game, even though the Packers were able to come out there with the win. But he is definitely a guy that I really enjoy watching. So I think Jordan Love will get the Packers a win over the Jacksonville Jaguars. Next up, it's the Miami Dolphins and the Arizona Cardinals. Now, the Arizona Cardinals, of course, are coming off a big-time win over the Chargers in the last game. And, it's going to be a tough challenge. I mean, Kyler Murray seems to have a little bit of momentum, but even though with Miami, the quarterback situation isn't that good, I just think Miami might have a little bit too much weapons on their offense to take over. So we'll wait and see on that. I could be wrong, but I think Miami will be okay to get this one. The New York Jets taking on the New England Patriots, and this is a bit of a toss-up game because although I do think the Patriots had a bit of a rough go-around the last time, I still think Drake May might be the future for the Patriots, but ultimately, I think for this game, I'm going to say the New York Jets get the win over the Patriots. Next up, we got the Baltimore Ravens and the Cleveland Browns. Yeah, I mean, Lamar Jackson and the Ravens are just heating up, and I think they're going to continue that momentum winning against Cleveland. I mean, it's going to be a tough challenge for sure, but I still think Baltimore's got momentum. Same thing with Cincinnati. I think the Bengals are going to take care of business against the Philadelphia Eagles, putting more pressure on Nick Sirianni, who might be in the hot seat, and we might be seeing the last season for him as head coach of the Philadelphia Eagles. Now, Houston Texans and the Indianapolis Colts. Houston won the first game in Indianapolis, and now the Texans have the home field for this rematch. Right now, the AFC South is tightened up in the division. The Texans really had an underwhelming game against the Packers. They lost on a field goal, and really this is the first time that I think D'Amico Ryans has gotten criticized for some game management decisions, while Bobby Slowick, again, continues to get criticized for not being able to make some big-time plays on the offense. And really, C.J. Stroud and the Texans got rattled. They're going up against a Colts team who has Anthony Richardson back, and it's going to be a very tough game because I think the Texans and the Colts are definitely the two tight teams. If the Texans were to win this game, they would definitely put further separation between them and the Indianapolis Colts, and this is going to be a tough one. Now, I'm going to try something. I think unless otherwise proven, maybe I could be wrong, unless otherwise proven, I might as well just keep picking the Texans every single week, just for the heck of it. But I feel like Houston can beat Indianapolis. I think they'll be able to bounce back in this one and get the win to go to 6-2. But if the Texans lose to the Colts, then yeah, there's definitely going to be some concern from the fans. Even though it would only be at the midway point, Texans in my mind are still the best team in the AFC South, but we'll have to wait and see what happens there. So for now, I'm picking the Texans to beat the Colts. Hopefully they go through on the promise. We got the Detroit Lions and the Tennessee Titans. I'm picking the Detroit. The Lions definitely coming off a big win over Minnesota, and I think that carries over to them. Tampa Bay and Atlanta, the Buccaneers, I feel like are starting to get some momentum. However, there is some concern. Chris Godwin injured in the last game for the Buccaneers against the Ravens. So the question is, how will the Buccaneers be able to overcome that? And then I'm not sure. I think Mike Evans was also injured in that game as well. So clearly, Baker Mayfield is going to be without a couple of his key weapons. Well, I think Atlanta might build some momentum here. So it's a toss-up game. The Buccaneers I would have more confidence in with those players that are out there. But as far as I'm concerned, for this one, yeah, I think I'm going to give the slight edge to the Atlanta Falcons, and I could be wrong. So I'm picking Atlanta to win that game over Tampa Bay. The Chargers against the New Orleans Saints, at some point the Saints are going to break through, but I just don't think it's going to be against the Chargers, so I picked the Chargers to win. Buffalo Bills and the Seattle Seahawks. Amari Cooper getting another chance to show that he is a valuable asset for the Bills. I think Buffalo gets that one. Now we have Chicago and Washington. Now, this was the game that was supposed to be hyped up because of Jaden Daniels versus Caleb Williams, the top two picks in the NFL draft, albeit it was Williams at 1 and then Jaden Daniels at 2. So this was supposed to be a heightened up game for both teams as far as the top two picks in the NFL draft, much like last year with C.J. Stroud and Bryce Young. But, with Jaden Daniels out for the time being as well, so it's going to be we'll have to wait and see what happens there. But I just feel like I don't know what the Commanders can do without Jaden Daniels. Now, ultimately, I feel that the Bears are going to get this one, so I pick Chicago to win. Kansas City Chiefs and the Las Vegas Raiders, I don't know if anybody's stopping the Chiefs right now. I think, they got some momentum, whereas I think the Raiders are definitely having some problems. So I think it'll be a tough game. I don't think it's going to be an easy Kansas City win, but I think Kansas City will get this one. So Denver and Carolina. I like the Broncos in that one. I think Denver will be able to get themselves a big-time win after demolishing the New Orleans Saints. Then we have Dallas and San Francisco. Now, years past, the 49ers seem to have owned the Cowboys, whether it be in the playoffs or in the regular season. However, Brandon Ayuk is out for the season with an ACL injury. Deebo Samuel is battling pneumonia. I mean, right now things are not looking great for the 49ers at this moment, whereas the Dallas Cowboys, they have their own issues. And, I really want to pick San Francisco, but I'm just not entirely sure. Something tells me that the Dallas Cowboys are going to get this one. And then finally, the Pittsburgh Steelers taking on the New York Giants. I mean, Russell Wilson really stood out in his return back. We'll see if he can continue the momentum. I'll give the Steelers the win on that one. So, my winners for Week 8, Minnesota, Green Bay, Miami, the Jets, Baltimore, Cincinnati, Houston, Detroit, Atlanta, the Chargers, Buffalo, Chicago, Kansas City, Denver, Dallas, and Pittsburgh. Those are my winners for Week 8. Hopefully, they all fill up my promise of them winning. And that's going to wrap it up here for this edition of Krocking, Locking, and Dropping. We'll wait and see what happens in the World Series. We'll wait and see what happens in Week 8. And we'll certainly keep an eye on the Cleveland Browns saga. But folks, if you want to listen to more of my podcasts, be sure to subscribe to my YouTube channel, KWCLINE91, and also to Podbean and Spotify. That's where I publish my podcasts for people to listen to. Next time, folks, it will be my 40th episode, and hopefully I get a banger of an episode. No, not people from Bangor, Maine. That's a pun on words. But anyways, folks, thank you very much for tuning in. I will see you guys next time on this another episode of Krocking, Locking, and Dropping with the K-Rock.